My name is Josh Friedman. I am an adjunct lecturer in the psychology department. I teach a writing intensive course and a class on memory and attention. I'm going to talk today about how I use two sort of broad elements in a couple different ways to build classroom belonging. Just going to share some slides. Just give me one moment. So if anybody could give me a thumbs up that things are, thank you so much. I think largely about belonging from this idea of balance within a group of people. This comes from a social, psychological, or social constructivist sort of point of view about learning, where there's this thing we call the zone of proximal development. That's what ZPD stands for, where students start in this kind of comfort zone in the middle, and the teacher, whose comfort zone is much broader and larger, deep and more complex, is able to encourage students to sort of step outside of that comfort zone and sort of play together in this zone of proximal development. And that tends, I sort of overlap that idea with how groups go through group processing stages that take on different dynamics that we know about from a history of research in social psychology. And I think this is what's going on in the classroom. So what I describe is sort of how I think about this really is how the class moves through these stages of introducing themselves to the topic, coming into conflict over it and its ideas, creating their own sorts of ideas about that topic, and then later on, what I think sort of shallowly gets called adjourning in a lot of literature is actually a stage of reflection and identity, and sort of taking that thing that they created and making it a part of themselves. And so what I use to think about this is that there are certain tools that help us prepare for each of these group stages and help students prepare for each of those group stages. So when I ask myself, how do I build a sense of belonging in the classroom? What I think about is, how do I take the identities that students are coming with and generate purpose for them to introduce themselves into the classroom with and into that topic with. And so I'll talk about how I do that, how I highlight their identity through them identifying their own purpose for being there. I'll talk about how I identify, or with them help identify or introduce norms of behavior, habits, agreements, values, things like that into the classroom. And then how we use these to sort of establish roles, right? Who's going to do what and when, and sort of set goals for the class. So we want to do this first, and then that's second, and that's going to help them feel like the experience is concrete and something that they can participate in. Becomes incredibly important to me. And through those roles and reaching for those goals, I open up the opportunity for students to create their own meaning from the experience, right? So this isn't sort of like they can take away whatever they want, right? They sort of need to like stand behind it and put their name to it and sort of speak about it to others. But I think about, how do I not just apply or think about these four tools throughout the process of building classrooms and building senses of belonging in that classroom, but also how do I include students on co-creating each of these tools? And so I'll talk about two elements that I use in order to do that. The first one is sort of something that addresses this idea of purpose and norms through the use of name cards. And the second, we establish goals and roles and meaning through a co-created syllabus design. So to begin with the name cards, they're really quite simple on the face of it. It's threefold, right, like paper tent. You go, it sort of like sits on their desk. It's a blank sheet of computer paper. I keep them throughout the semester. I have a stack of them in my backpack because, guaranteed, they're going to lose them in the midst of these things. And that's important to me. And I want to send a message that their name is important to me. So I take care of that throughout the semester. They write their name on the front, and then they also answer this question, right? So they answer this question about, why am I here? And we do this is like the very first thing they do in that class on the very first day, is they complete these name cards so that it sends the message that not only do I care about why they're here, but I really think it's valuable for them to care about why they're here, right? To identify that and actually bring it into the space. And they write 3 responses to this. And this helps them sort of like identify and isolate their purpose, right? Like, why am I here? And I'm going to put it on my desk and like have it be in front of me every day throughout the rest of the semester. These are some examples of purposes or answers to this question that students have written, right? So I think people's stories are interesting. Psychology helped me. I gained satisfaction from helping people. This comes from the writing intensive course where they do a lot of research. These come now from the attention and memory course where I'd like to know if there are any techniques that can help improve memory. This course seemed interesting. And of course, the classic, like, I need this to graduate, right? Finally, like another example here is somebody that I found fascinating, right? Like, I want to be a child therapist, and different children's attention will be different. So it'd be helpful to know how it works, right? Like, they're already directly applying what they can gain from the class to something they're currently experiencing and practicing and building skills around, right? And that's what we want, right? Like, that's gold. And so I babysit a kid with ADHD and want to know how to help keep her on task. And of course, again, it fit perfectly within my schedule. Like, we all have these sort of logistical and practical concerns. And this gives them, asking them for 3 answers gives them that space to sort of like get that out, right? If that's what they need to do, but also spend a little bit more time to be like, no, but really, right? Like, why am I here? Okay, and then, right, like the idea of the name cards also helps me communicate norms and sort of like what are the norms of the class going to be, right? And so like one of them right up front, it's like, I will learn your name. Like, that's a norm. And I expect them to learn each other's names and to learn my name and like, right, so that we all see each other sort of eye to eye. It depends on your sort of like neuroscientific flavor of bias here, but generally people discuss this as like, your name is the sweetest sound to your brain, right? And so like, it's really important if we're going to think about generating a sense of belonging, like how do we create those sweet sounds, right, for one another. And so like, this is, just one example of what that looks like. Everybody's sitting around the class with these. They get sort of, like destroyed over the course of the semester in one way or another, but they serve the purpose while doing so, right? Other examples of norms, right, is that like we agree on class values as we go throughout the semester, both at the beginning and at each stage. I start every class asking if anybody has any burning questions, right? Like, the idea of belonging is that like whatever I'm bringing, right, like belongs here, right? And so if they have something that's sort of gnawing at their mind and they can't focus on what's going on, they're going to feel like they're sort of like they're not a part of it. They can't keep up if they don't have a chance to get out those burning questions. And so we make that a norm in the class. And finally, right, like I think a lot about, especially in cases where, we think hoity-toity about all kinds of research and data and stuff like that that's come through, like, how do we help ourselves feel like we're a part of that? Right? Like, how do we help ourselves feel like, no, we are researchers and we are learners and we're doing things that are just as sophisticated as the things we're learning about, to help include ourselves in that activity and be a part of that sort of community of inquiry, if you will, as researchers. And so I talk to them about, we're going to use we language. It's not going to be them and those researchers. It's going to be like, we found this together, right? And this sort of introduces, right, like how we think about roles in the class, right? Like, so we are creating this class, we are generating the content for the class. It's not me telling them what to do. I'm posing ideas to them and I'm asking for their consent. And that also helps build a sense of belonging. And so we do that by co-creating the syllabus. I introduce the syllabus to them and I ask them, how does this work for you? What challenges do you see? What problems can you highlight for me? What suggestions do you have for improving the syllabus? And we make this a very formal process through feedback and surveys and this kind of thing that I can like scan through a spreadsheet very easily. And I also provide opportunities for them to discuss it on the first day of class. Again, just to use all that time we can to create that sense of belonging. But specifically, one of the examples of this as an activity that I come up with is that in the memory and attention course, I have students create discussion questions and article presentations. There are a lot of different ways to do this, but what I want to sort of just pitch to you is like any way that students are generating content that the class then sort of mulls over and chews on, right? Like, that's a co-creation that's helping them belong. And what I really want to describe it as is like, if students are coming up with discussion questions every day, right? Like as small groups or whatever, that then the whole class discusses, they become facilitators. They become facilitators of people's learning, and they can feel responsible for the activity that goes on in the class, and that responsibility creates belonging, right? In the same way that giving some sort of presentation, right, like creates them as knowledge curators, right? Like they go and they scour the literature. They pick an article and they say, we want to present, we want to talk about this article. And I say, great, amazing. Tell us about what you learned. And all of a sudden they're responsible for the knowledge in the class as well. Finally, I'll just talk briefly. The Psych 250 is a writing intensive course. It's a double course. It's a lot of work. They do a ton. They write 4 research papers. And it's really important to me that this activity be actually meaningful to them and not something that they sort of like need to feel like they check the boxes of. And so what do? I have them come up with the topics for research, right? Like it's so simple to just say, hey, you be in charge. Like you tell me what you want to discover. We of course spend time in the beginning weeks, like figuring out what the best form of a research question is. So it's something that like theoretically and empirically people can grab onto throughout the rest of the semester. But once they say, this is what I care about, and this is what will be meaningful to me, and they vote on it, like those are the things we end up studying, right? So some examples of that students have come up with in the past couple of years are effects of stress on GPA, right? Very relevant. Listening to music while studying on attention, right? Also very relevant. And finally, TikTok hours on working memory, right? Huge as far as like they're concerned in the current day and age. So, right, like just, it could be anything, right? For us, it's research topics, but it could be, books and things to read. It could be conversations to have. It could be projects to build. But finding ways that the major aspects of the course are things that are co-created or co-designed with input from them, I think really helps round out that picture of belonging. And so just to like wrap up really briefly, right, like when I'm thinking about how do I build a sense of belonging, these are the 4 things that I really think about co-creating or welcoming students in to be a part of generating these things. Thank you so much for listening today. I really appreciate it.